Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video, and welcome to Jane Austen July. Today is the 1st of July, and today I'm going to be talking about why I love listening to Jane Austen's books on audiobook. So, happy Jane Austen July. Here we are in another Jane Austen July again. I'm planning for this video to go up on the 1st of July. And yeah, as with every year, every Jane Austen July, I'm really excited to have a month full of lots of exciting reading and listening. And I thought today I would do a video talking about why I really like listening to Jane Austen on audiobook, and with a few Jane Austen audiobook recommendations. In the comments in my announcement video, someone asked for some audiobook recommendations. So I thought it would be nice to kind of combine that with talking about why I love listening to Jane Austen on audiobook, because I listen to Jane Austen on audiobook a lot. I would say that audiobooks have been, for the last like 3 or 4 years at least, the main way I consume Jane Austen. Over the last few years, I have read some of Jane Austen's Juvenilia or Lady Susan in physical form, but I don't think I've actually read one of Jane Austen's main 6 novels physically since like 2020. I feel like the last few years I have been listening to her books a lot, and I love listening to Jane Austen on audiobook. I've just started listening to Emma on audiobook, narrated by Juliet Stevenson, and once I finish listening to Emma on audiobook, I think I will have listened to every Jane Austen novel, and some Jane Austen novels I've listened to many, many times, especially Mansfield Park, Pride and Prejudice, and Sense and Sensibility. In fact, Pride and Prejudice, I must have listened to the Rosman Pike audiobook so many times. Like, I reckon I've read Pride and Prejudice like 12 times now, and probably half of that on audiobook, listening to the amazing audiobook narrated by Rosman Pike. In general, when I listen to audiobooks, I don't just sort of like sit down and listen to them. I tend to listen to audiobooks while I do other things, you know, cooking or baking or cleaning, putting up laundry or driving, usually only rereads when driving, or doing exercise or doing a puzzle, or, you know, any of those kind of stuff. I would recommend, if you're trying to listen to audiobooks, it's actually easier to focus on the audiobook if you're doing something else at the same time, but something else that you don't need to like focus a lot of your brain on, if that makes sense, such as, you know, exercise or cooking or cleaning or whatever. So why do I enjoy listening to Jane Austen on audiobook so much? So one reason why I really love listening to Jane Austen is because I just think her books work really, really well read aloud. In general, I feel this way about all 19th century literature. 19th century literature often works really, really well on audiobook and read aloud because these were writers who were writing to be read aloud. It was a very, very common thing within 19th century kind of family circles for people to read aloud. You know, in the days before TV and radio, you made your own entertainment. And that might be someone playing the piano or an instrument or singing, but that might also be someone reading aloud. And it was really, really normal and common for people to read aloud from books to entertain each other. That was so normal in the 19th century. And so a lot of 19th century authors were writing their books thinking that these would be read aloud to other people. We also know that Jane Austen used to read things aloud to her family. So actually the first way that anyone experienced a Jane Austen book was probably Jane Austen's family listening to her read scenes from her books to them, which I think is really, really cool and makes it like really lovely to listen to Jane Austen on audiobook and imagine her like reading bits of her books aloud to her family. We know that Jane Austen's family loved the theatre and loved putting on amateur dramatics when she was a child, but also that she used to read aloud her work to her family members. And we think she used that as like part of her editorial process, like seeing what bits people laughed at and like how the different scenes went down, which I just think is really fun. And in fact, there's plenty of scenes within Jane Austen's books about people reading things aloud. In Sense and Sensibility, Marianne is sort of really like shocked and appalled that Edward Ferrars has like a really bad voice for reading aloud and he doesn't read aloud very well. And then in Mansfield Park, Henry Crawford is like fantastic at reading aloud and everyone's very impressed by his skill at reading aloud. And reading aloud and like listening to someone else read something, to me, feels like really 19th century. So obviously, although audiobooks are, you know, very digital and modern now, and I have so many on my phone, at the same time, it also feels kind of 19th century to listen to someone else reading you a book. And like I said, I think her books just work really well on audiobook. Her writing is so funny and witty, and that for me really comes alive on audiobook. She also has a lot of amazing characters, some of whom are a little eccentric, a little exaggerated, like Mr. Collins, who are just hilarious listening to. And also quite a lot of Jane Austen books audiobooks have quite short chapters, Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility especially, which are the two I listen to the most on audiobook. A lot of the chapters are like 10-15 minutes, which makes it very like easy listening to fit in around other things and just listen to a chapter here and there, and that's something that I really enjoy. I feel like her books just work so well on audiobook. I think another reason why I enjoy listening to Jane Austen's books on audiobook is because I love rereading, and I really love rereading on audiobook. And for me, I do a lot of my rereading on audiobook. Like I do listen to a lot of audiobooks that I've never listened to before, but I would say that of the books that I reread, like 90% of that is done via listening to audiobook. I think partly because, you know, my physical TBR is slightly bigger than I would like, and so if I reread a book physically, I feel like I'm taking away time from a new book that's on my physical TBR, whereas my audiobook TBR, like I do have audiobooks that I want to read, but it's just a lot smaller than my physical TBR. So rereading something on audiobook just feels like more acceptable for me to do. And also I really like rereading on audiobook because it's a slightly different experience, and often a new experience. It's a new way of experiencing a novel and a slightly different way of reading a novel, which might make you notice things that you didn't notice before. Obviously, I have listened to like the Rosman Pike audiobook of Pride and Prejudice so many times now that it's not giving me like a completely new Pride and Prejudice experience, because I have listened to that audiobook as many times as I have read the book physically, I would say. But in general, I really enjoy rereading on audiobook because it gives me that slightly new angle, and also because it's just really comforting, which I think is the other main reason why I like listening to Jane Austen on audiobook. Jane Austen on audiobook is like my big comfort listen. I find her books so fun and so rewarding and so comforting to listen to on audiobook. I think partly because I know the books so well, partly also because they're not too long, most of them. Like I also find listening to Gaskell or Dickens on audiobook really comforting, but in general their books are a lot longer. So I can get kind of all the comfort in a shorter space of time when I'm listening to a Jane Austen book. I feel like some people have like a particular film or TV show that they watch when they're ill, and when I am ill, I listen to Rosman Pike's Pride and Prejudice. Like that's what I do when I'm ill. I'm also someone who gets migraines, like not all the time, but probably once every 6 weeks at least. And if I have a migraine, I lie down in a darkened room and listen to a Jane Austen audiobook, because I find that really comforting if I'm not feeling great, but also if I fall asleep, which is like your aim when you have a migraine. You really are trying to fall asleep. If I fall asleep and wake up 2 hours later and I'm at a different point in the story, that's absolutely fine, because I know Jane Austen's books so well that I can pick up anywhere. In the same way, actually, if I'm ever like on a really long plane journey or I really can't sleep, then Jane Austen audiobooks are the thing I go to and listen to, because I know that if I fall asleep for a bit and wake up, then I'll be somewhere else in the story, and that's fine because I know Jane Austen's books really well and I can pick up exactly where I left off. For me, listening to Jane Austen is just really comforting and so lovely, and I think because I know those books so well, the more I listen to them, the more comforting they become. There's a few audiobooks specifically that I just have listened to so many times. That's definitely one of the big reasons why I love listening to Jane Austen on audiobook, because I just find her books so comforting and because I know her books so well. So I wanted to talk about a few of my favourite Jane Austen audiobooks, and specifically about 3 narrators who I really like. The first one is Rosman Pike, who is my favourite Jane Austen audiobook narrator. I just think she is a wonderful narrator of audiobooks. So she has read 2 Jane Austen books, Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility, and these are my most listened to audiobooks of any audiobooks. As I said, I must have listened to the Rosman Pike Pride and Prejudice 5 or 6 times, and I think I've listened to her Sense and Sensibility 3 or 4 times. I really love the way she performs these books. She's got a great voice, and I really just enjoy listening to her audiobooks. I've just listened to these so many times, and I find them such a comfort and such a lovely, calming, relaxing listen. I wish she would narrate some more Jane Austen audiobooks. I've been kind of hoping that she would do all of them, but I think the Sense and Sensibility one came out quite a while ago now, and there hasn't been a sign of any more, so maybe not, but I do think they are amazing. Then another great audiobook narrator for Jane Austen is Juliet Stevenson, and Juliet Stevenson has done audiobooks of all of Jane Austen's books, so you can go and listen to any of Jane Austen's main 6 novels on audiobook with Juliet Stevenson narrating. I have really fond memories of listening to her audiobook of Mansfield Park when I was studying Mansfield Park at university, when I was, I guess, 18 or 19 years old. It was in first year, and I feel like I had the CD of it. I don't know where I got the CD from. I don't have it anymore, but I feel like I had the CD and would like put it into my disk drive in my laptop to like listen to bits of Mansfield Park, and that was like part of my revision. And then I'm currently listening to her audiobook of Emma, which I'm really enjoying. I can't remember if I've listened to any of her other Jane Austen audiobooks, but I have listened to quite a lot of other audiobooks of classics that Juliet Stevenson has done, and I think she's really, really great. Like, she's just a really solid, reliable narrator of classics. I love her audiobook of North and South. I love her audiobook of Little Dorrit. Like, she's just wonderful, and she's very, very good on Jane Austen too. And then the final audiobook narrator I wanted to mention is Frances Barber. Now, she has only recorded one Jane Austen book, but that is Mansfield Park, and I love her audiobook of Mansfield Park so much. I do love Juliet Stevens' Mansfield Park too, but Frances Barber's Mansfield Park is just amazing. I love the audiobook. I've listened to it 3 or 4 times, I would say. Like, I've listened to it quite a few times, and every time I just really, really enjoy it. I love Mansfield Park a lot, and I also feel like Mansfield Park is a book by Jane Austen that is a little less loved, a little underrated, and it's really worth a reread. So if you've read Mansfield Park before physically and you didn't really get on with it, it might be worth trying the audiobook by Frances Barber, because it's a really fantastic audiobook, just really well narrated, really enjoyable to listen to. And I feel like Mansfield Park is a really important Jane Austen to reread, because it's very subtle and a bit slower than some of Jane Austen's other books. It's less of a love story. It's got more kind of social criticism in it. Fanny Price is a bit more of an introverted character. And so it's a really nice one to reread and to re-listen to and kind of think about it in a different way. And I just really, really love Frances Barber's audiobook of Mansfield Park. I think it's amazing. So there we go. That's why I love listening to Jane Austen on audiobook. And those are a few of my favourite narrators who I really do recommend. Like I said, Juliet Stevenson has recorded all of Jane Austen's books, so she is very reliable for any of them. But if you want a really fantastic audiobook of Pride and Prejudice or Sense and Sensibility, then Rosman Pike is a really great place to turn to. And if you want a great audiobook of Mansfield Park, then I really recommend Frances Barber's version. Otherwise, that's all for now. Happy Jane Austen July. Do let me know down in the comments, do you listen to Jane Austen on audiobook? Do you get on with audiobooks? What do you think of listening to Jane Austen on audiobook? Do you have any other great Austen audiobooks to recommend? And otherwise, that's all for now, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.